Yeah, Tony's fine.
Perfect.
Let's see. Are we there? I'm trying to see. I'm looking at the YouTube side to
I just
see.
got a notification that we are live.
It usually takes about 30 seconds, but again, I'm a noob. Sometimes I feel like I am, even though I've done. Oh, now I got to mute the. Yeah. Okay. So Lou, how are you doing?
Tony, I'm doing quite well, thank you. Just catching up from the jet lag, but otherwise, I'm doing quite well.
I told you off the air, but I just want to thank you for doing these types of interviews with smaller channels, smaller entities, because I mean, we're my channel is relatively small, and I see you do these interviews with different people who are, I don't know, seemingly don't reach that many people, but you're
Tony,
still doing them.
absolutely. I mean, honestly, I don't care if you have one subscriber or none. I've made a point to always try to make myself available as much as I can. I think this topic is important enough where any single human being that wants to have the conversation, certainly if I have the bandwidth, I'll do it.
One of the most problematic issues I ran into was I've seen so many of your interviews that I did, all these questions I came up with, they all seem to have been asked of you before. And so the challenge is to try to get new information, or actually I kind of wanted to concentrate on, just, I hate to say what your feelings are on the matter, but it's almost like that where, if every question has been asked of you to date, what can you do? I was wanting to concentrate on, honestly, as the effort goes forward, how do we concentrate on getting, coordinating any possible new information with regards to
Sure.
like energy and that kind of thing into the injected. And I'm sure all this has been talked about, right? But I guess in some way, each interviewer has
Yeah.
to try to get their point across somehow, I
Well,
guess.
let me share with you maybe some insight that I haven't really shared before. Hopefully, because the one thing about this topic, it's evolving so fast, and more and more people are getting involved. I have an interview, for example, tonight on Kennedy, and there's a lot to talk about. Let's just look at the last week and a half. You have this draft language that's come out. That's 5 short little pages that really says a lot. That's I think that's a major milestone in this discussion, and also the fact that we're now shifting into a new phase of this topic and disclosure. I've always mentioned like the last 4 years of our effort has been just phase one. And even though I talk about shifting gears because I'm a gearhead, and you want to get more and more speed, we've still always been in phase one up until now. And phase one really involved the 5 pillars of engagement: the legislative engagement, and executive level engagement, international engagement, media engagement, and finally public engagement. And looking where we've come over the last 4 years, I think it's pretty mind blowing. But then, of course, there's efforts that are still ongoing right now, associated with those 5 levels, those 5 pillars of engagement. But that still involves information from yesterday and today. The real question is, where do we go from here? What does tomorrow look like? And that's phase 2 of our endeavor. That is what we're now doing, which is really looking at international cooperation. I have some colleagues, some friends of mine over at Skyfort that have been very helpful looking at this strategically, and looking at this from a long-term perspective, right? So we're now.
Can I ask you a question about a personal question
You can
about?
ask me anything you want.
I don't mean to interrupt you, but I have all these questions I want to ask you.
Yeah, sure.
It's kind of personal. I have a flag just like the one you have on your wall behind you. It's my brother's flag, and I was wondering, have you ever shared whose flag that is? Is that a relative?
I can share it with you if you want. There's something that goes on top of that. I don't share very often, but let me read it to you. Hold on. Since you asked, I'll read it to you. A lot of people
I appreciate that.
get pretty upset. This is a politically charged topic, but it's part of my life. And what it says, Camp 7, Joint Detention Group, Guantanamo Bay, Cuba, Operation Enduring Freedom. The flag of the United States of America presented to Luis Elizondo. This flag was proudly flown over Camp 7 in Guantanamo Bay, Cuba on September 11th, 2015 for 9 minutes and 11 seconds. This flag is presented to you in the spirit of patriotism as a tribute to those who lost their lives during terrorist attacks on the United States of America, and on behalf of all soldiers, sailors, Marines, Airmen, and Coast Guardsmen serving under operation. This is a flag that was flown over a very interesting place in Cuba. Let me put
Guantanamo Bay.
Yeah, Gitmo. I have several flags. Some of these flags are from relatives who did make it. Other flags were presented to me in the course of my duties. I have quite a few hanging around here. Actually, I have one I think over here too. I can show you. Let me see here. I've got one up there on my bookcase. Forgive me here. I'm gonna.
Ooh, is that an M1A?
It is indeed. Wow, good eye. See, this is why I got to be really careful with these things, because people like you have a really, really good eye.
I did it. I got something new in the interview.
Yeah, I got that's the one. Then on the other side is
I thought it was like my brother's flag, who was in the Army in the early 80s. He passed away after he was discharged, so he didn't die, while in service. But I have his flag, and so it reminded me every time I see that flag there, I wonder who that is. But that's awesome. You don't have to worry about any kind of. I'm kind of a centrally. What would you say? I'm kind of a libertarian. I'm not really. One of the problems I feel like we have in this country is extremism on both sides of
I think you're right. I think I think we've polarized this country to the point where we can't even have a civilized conversation anymore. I think from my perspective, any momentum forward, we have to speak in a collaborative manner, and that's really what I went to war for reasons that were very personal to me, and one of those is so people have the ability to speak their minds, even if it contradicts or goes polar opposite to my own philosophical leanings. I will always defend the right for people to have their opinion and to have a conversation, even if it's at the cost of people, not being very nice to me. That's their right to have their own feelings and their own sentiments and their own philosophical perspective. And I think that's imperative.
One of the things that interested me the most, honestly, was not necessarily the UAP thing, but with you was your history, your 20-year military history. For me is, since I have family members, I have a lot of respect for people who've served our country. And that was honestly, that topic, is kind of really interesting to me. Because I know kind of what goes along with it. I know the troubles that my brother went through. I'll have to talk about that some of the time. It's a very long story, but after he got out, he got into some contracting, which turned out not to be a very good idea. And but he struggled. I've seen the struggles with this. But you seem to be a great example for people who've served that long and have probably been through the things that you've been through. And
look, there's a lot of people who go through horrible things all the time, and I'm certainly not the exception. There's an old saying, all gave some, but some gave all. And I guess I'm one of the lucky ones, right? Because at least I've still got all my fingers and my hands and my arms and my legs. There were some that really, really paid their dues, and that's why I try to honor them the best I can. But truth be told, service is service. It doesn't have to necessarily be military service. There are people who serve their community every day, whether it's volunteer work at a homeless shelter, or it's a teacher at an inner city school, or perhaps a triage nurse in an ER, or I think of course, we talk about our first responders, our EMTs, and our police and our fire as being heroes, and they certainly are. But there's a lot of heroes out there. There's a lot of heroes that serve every day, and they don't get recognition for it. And I guess for me is, I kind of like the old Johnny Cash song, right? I wear black I'm the man in black for the reasons, for other people. I kind of do the same thing. I want to honor their sacrifice and their commitment to their fellow man. It doesn't matter if it's with a machine gun or a briefcase or anything else. Service is service, and that to me is kind of a sacred duty for me.
Well, I didn't want to ask you too much about your personal beliefs, but I think there's kind of I don't know, there's a weird theme kind of running through some of these UAP, these UFO communities where there seems to be, like I had these, user submitted questions, and one of them was about, what, well, again, I'm using this new software, so I'm struggling with it, but it basically was talking about, it gave the impression that they thought that, religions would have to be dissolved or whatever. And I thought that was kind of a strange question, because personally, I don't see any conflict with anyone's religion.
No, I don't either. I tend to agree with you. I think, a lot of times we as mankind, we tend to get confused, and rather than worshiping a higher creator, we wind up worshiping institutions and organizations. And I don't think that there is. Let me say this: when you're standing at the base of a pyramid and you stand on one side of the pyramid, let's call that side science, and you try to look at the other side of the pyramid, and let's call that religion or spirituality, you can't even see the other side because they're so far away, and they're separated by what seems to be a lot of material and mass and rock. But in reality, the further you go up the pyramid, the more religion and the more science begins to align itself, until at some point when you get to a certain point in the pyramid where the two become indistinguishable, they become one. There is no difference between science and religion, and they come together. In fact, they support each other quite well. You have to have those two sides for the pyramid to even exist. And I think where we go wrong is that we're asking two different questions. Science is asking how, and religion is asking why. And that's why those two conversations are always, they don't reconcile with each other sometimes. And the reason is because they're asking two fundamentally different questions. And so I do think the two coexist quite well. I think science has, if anything, will ultimately help support the grandiose nature in which we live in this universe. And if you are a spiritual person, will probably bolster and reinforce some of your philosophies, because it just shows how expansive and wondrous our universe is, and the creator, right? So I think when Galileo is a prime example, when he first proposed that the Earth was not the center of the solar system, a lot of religious fundamentalists had thought it contradicted their belief system, when in reality it doesn't. When I went to Italy, and it was really interesting, a couple of years ago, not this last time, and speaking to one of the chief academics to the Vatican, he said, up until the 1600s, it was actually considered heresy to try to put restrictions and limitations on the notion of God, and the fact that mankind is the only intelligent species in the universe, because in essence it puts a limitation on the dominion of God and the notion of God, right? That God can only do certain things. It wasn't until later on where the church began to kind of, shun some of that scientific endeavor. But as we now know, one can look through a telescope and see that this incredibly huge universe, and in essence, it bolsters people's faith. Doesn't sequester it, doesn't squash it, doesn't suppress it, because it just shows that much more the beauty and the complexity of the natural world.
Let me ask you this. Do you think, some people think that the UAPs are, being flown, locally, or they're being controlled. I guess if you say they're being flown locally, then you're making the assertion that there's an entity in there. what do you see? How do you approach that? Do you look at those and say they're being controlled, they're machines, they're biological,
Well,
as
they're
far as
definitely intelligently controlled because they are responding according to our action. There's a reaction that is occurring, and statistically, it's very, very improbable that it's just random movement because it's mirroring our own action and
right,
responding to our action. So there is an intelligence, certainly.
whether it's AI or whatever, right?
Well, part of the problem is also our depth, our our lexicon and our terminology and definitions. Half the time we can't even agree on what disclosure means, right? So I actually, in some of my briefings, have to put up the definition of disclosure according to the Oxford Dictionary. So we're all on the same sheet of music, right? So another example is when you said it yourself, when these things are flying around, but and I've been guilty of this too, but in reality, they may not be flying at all.
Right.
Flight is a
Right.
very specific principle of physics that involves lift. And you have the four fundamental forces of thrust, lift, drag, and weight. And when you understand those principles, you can create, lifting bodies and control surfaces, and you fly. But what we're seeing doesn't seem to have any type of control surfaces or even wing structures or anything associated with flight as we know it. So to say that these things are even flying, they are in our atmosphere for sure, and they're maneuvering, but they may not even be flying in the way that we think about flight, if that makes
Yeah, and I
sense.
guess where I was going with that question was what related to communication. Do you know of any instances of where we've had direct communication with these
Well,
objects
so
besides just their reaction to our?
that's a great question. So again, let's get back to the definition lexicon. And yes, I'm splitting hairs on purpose for a reason. What is communication? When I have two German shepherds, they're my fur babies. They're like my third and fourth kid. When I say go fetch, I'm communicating, and my dog a request and intent, and my dog responds accordingly. However, when I see a friend across a crowded room and I can't speak to them and I just wave my hand to get their attention, I'm communicating. I am communicating. It may not be verbal or oral, but I'm communicating. And if they do this back, they're responding. They're communicating right back to me in intent and acknowledgement. Yes, I'm here. I see you, and yes, I recognize you. When we're doing military exercises in the South China Sea, are we communicating something to the Chinese government? Yes, we are. Absolutely. It's a very strong communication. So when we say,
I was asking you personally, if have you ever had any communication from any source like that?
well, again, so do you mean like verbal communication, like sitting down with something or someone and talking, or do you mean
Well, you hear so much about telepathy and all this. There's so
okay.
many. There's a little genre that's popped up around this where there are people who claim that, oh, I can channel these beings, and you need to
Oh, I
come
see what you're
and
talking. Yeah, you're
you
talking about.
come
Yeah,
and
yeah, yeah.
spend
You're talking.
$299.99 for a session, and I
Yeah,
will channel them for you.
yeah, psychic
Yeah,
or consciousness. Well,
but
again, I've always said extraordinary claims require extraordinary evidence,
right.
and they've held me to that test. So I think it's only fair we hold everybody to that same test. The problem is when you talk to people who say they're communicating and channeling. It's very subjective. There's no way to quantify and qualify that. There's no way to prove it. Of course, you can't disprove it either, but you can't prove it. So it becomes very difficult. And for me, anybody who does that and then charges money, first of all, from that perspective, kind of raises my eyebrow. But even more so is that when individuals have been caught red-handed defrauding people, whether it's throwing flares out of an aircraft
Yeah.
or these other things, lying to the public, for years about who they are as a person.
The funny thing about that is, though, like if you were to say something like that, I would believe it.
Well, and
So
this is
people
why I
get,
don't. This is precisely why I
yeah,
don't, because
yeah,
it's really easy to become a cult of personality in this topic.
yes, and
Um,
I'm seeing that a lot here lately.
yeah,
Recently.
absolutely.
Yeah.
But it's also imperative that we hold true to our values and that we don't go down that road. That's where most people get lost because they start going down that road of self grandeur. And I, you know, I look. There's a reason why I joined the Army as a grunt. I could have gone in as an officer because of my education background. But I really wanted to serve on the ground. I wanted to my father always told me, in order to lead, you first must learn how to follow and what it's like to follow. My commitment to truth and transparency is unwavering, and that's why I do the things I do and why I do it. That's why, for example, with you, I'm taking time out of my work to do this. I'm losing money. I'm not, and you're not paying me, and I'm not asking you to pay me, and I won't accept payment. So for me, it's, I do this because I believe in it, and I could very easily, if I wanted to, line my pockets and make myself rich. I get on social media, and all these people make these just absolute dumbass, unqualified statements about Lue's making money with History Channel, Lue's making money with a movie deal. First of all, I didn't sign a movie deal. Okay, they may make a movie about me, but I'm not making a penny off of it. I've made it public. I'm not going to be part of that.
I think a lot of those people come with baggage. They come with the thought in their head, that very thought in their head. If they knew you, I feel like I know you to some degree, because I've just watched excuse me, I've watched 20 interviews, and you seem like the type of guy that's really easy to get to know. And I would never approach you with you know what I mean? I would never assume anything like that.
Well, with me, what you see is what you get, and I prefer to, I don't hide my claws. I prefer to keep my claws in the light and let everybody see them. I have my faults and my imperfections, certainly, and I try my best to own those the best I can. Of course, my biggest faults are the ones that I don't recognize, right? Because you don't know what you don't know. But I've always been very much what you see is what you get. And that's really, I think, the only way to have an honest conversation about a topic like this. People lose themselves very quickly, and there's people that make all sorts of claims, and then will take people on this wild journey, only for them to wind up even being more confused. And what I want to do is help people get less confused, not more confused.
I mean, the other thing that I've noticed lately these are my own thoughts, or whatever, my own notions that are gathering in my head. I mean, obviously know Danny Sheehan, right?
I do, very much so.
I was kind of surprised. I mean, how do I say this without being offensive?
No. Don't worry about being offensive, man. Please just say it. I know your intent is good, so I won't be offended.
I was a little bit. I was watching him during the Big Phone Home that Lewis put together. Excuse me, I'm sorry. I don't know where this frog. The beings have put a frog in my throat. I noticed that he focused a lot on what I thought would be political. Like he mentioned the Green New Deal several times, and I'm not going to. And this is one reason I brought up the energy issue. The very first thing was because one thing I'm concerned about is that people are going to use this subject matter as a way to influence politics without actually having the right answers. Because I know that the Green New Deal is, all politics aside, I know that that's trillions of dollars funding outdated technology. And what I would like to see is a hold put on that kind of thing. A hold put on, because I feel like we're going to have some disclosure regarding energy, right? I'm assuming that.
Well, one would hope, right, with this revolutionary technology, that there's revolutionary advancements. I'm not political, and I tell people that all the time. I have some personal feelings, but I respect everybody's political views, even if I don't agree with them. I respect them, and I think this is a topic that we've so far been very successful keeping out of the hands of partisan politics. Ultimately, you can't avoid this topic being political. It will be political because it involves a lot of people. Hopefully, though, it is political in a nonpartisan, or at least bipartisan way, where both the left and the right can come together and say, yeah, this is important. I agree with you. I don't like to insert other things into the topic of UAP because I think it muddies the water. And it doesn't matter if it's a Green New Deal or anything else. I prefer to keep this by itself, and that's why I'm very careful not to express my own political views. I'm very, very happy to see that we have this bipartisan effort between folks like Senator Harry Reid, who's a dear friend of mine, and also Senator Marco Rubio, right, who's a fellow Miami Cuban. So
Yeah.
it goes to show that we can work together on this. And there's other ones. There's Congressman Tim Burchett, for example, who is in Tennessee, and I've had the privilege and honor to speak with him, and he's, he wants to do what's best for his constituents. He's not trying to make this a political issue. This is an American issue, and frankly, it's a global issue. And my experience so far with the committees in Senate and Congress has been nothing but nonpartisan. These are folks that will tell you privately, look, this is important. We want to figure this out. We want to try to keep the politics out of this because we realize this topic really is important and affects all of us collectively. And I applaud that. I think that's exactly the way we need to approach this. This is a topic that involves all of us.
I did want to ask you a few what you might think are silly questions. But again,
don't worry about it. No such thing.
I just bought this camera, and I think I made a mistake. Okay, I had it modified. It's one of those that you can have modified to only see IR. Mm-hmm. And I thought maybe without giving away any kind of state secrets, you could tell me what if you can see them the beings between 700 and 1200 nanometers. IR, because that's all this camera sees.
Well, infrared is there's the problem with infrared is people again don't really understand what infrared is. Infrared is just simply below the visible red spectrum. Infra meaning below, and then red spectrum, right? So infrared. But there's several types of infrared, and you can use infrared passive, or you can do infrared active illumination. You can do starlight, and then of course you have stuff which is thermal, right? So like FLIR technology will sometimes use thermal imaging as well and augment that with the actual infrared image. So you can see anything that is the way infrared works. It's picking up a wavelength based upon a specific signature. As it relates, and usually it's the reason.
That's why I'm asking for that specific signature that you've seen on these top secret documents. The wavelength itself.
Yeah, I think infrared is certainly a viable approach. It's not the one I've been referring to.
It's the radio frequencies. That's the one you've been the sound and radio.
Great question, Tony.
See, that was my next question. I was hoping that there would be. You could
there is some.
You could do the frequency with your fingers, just write it down.
There's some people who have been postulating that infrasonics may be a way to detect these anomalies, which is ultra low frequency type acoustic signatures. We do know we can detect meteors, for example, coming into the Earth's atmosphere through these signatures. Again, that's not what I was referring to as far as the everybody wants to know what's that one easy way you're saying this been right below our nose. Well, that's we're working on that. But there's a lot of other folks that, for example, electromagnetic anomalies as well. There's a capability out there called MADAR that some people have claimed to have great success with. And then there's others like we saw with SkyHub, right, where you have an ability with a fisheye to look at 180 degrees in the sky. And you know what? They've detected some pretty interesting stuff as well. And then you have,
that's just based on a type of
electro-optical, just regular. Yep. And
regular light, beautiful,
regular ambient light, very sensitive. But yeah, and so there's all sorts of, and of course infrared. Infrared is a good way as well because.
So this camera's for sale if anybody wants to buy it. It's kind of funny because this whole thing's come up. It comes up. I get excited. I got to have a tool, right? I'm a design build contractor, so I got to have a tool. I got to buy something. I got to buy a tool. And the first thing I get on Reddit is, oh man, that camera's not going to work. That ain't going to work. And I'm like, what? I'm going to ask Lue Elizondo.
Yeah, well, the camera will work, but it works just like the human eye will, but in a lower wavelength. And no,
Yeah.
I don't think I think it's premature to put it up on eBay right now. If you want to sell it,
Okay.
maybe I'll buy it from you.
I might try. I do live next to a nuclear plant. I might go out and do some sky watching one evening.
Do you? May I ask where you live, Tony?
Chattanooga, Tennessee.
Okay. Well, yeah,
Yeah.
that's certainly some, yeah, definitely keep your
We
eyes
used to
open.
go. The reason I'm so interested in this, for anybody who wants to know, is when I was 12, I was on a camping trip, and I had some other experiences in life that, I was brought up in the church, right? I went to Sunday school every Sunday. We had the storyboard with this, baby Jesus story. And after a few experiences I had, I'm like, okay, something's going south here. And so I started studying all these different religions, and I came to the conclusion in my own mind that, yeah, the God that Southern Baptists are worshiping may be a bigger God. It may be that there's one big God, and all the other ones fall under His umbrella. So, or something, you know what I mean? In other words, I felt like I started feeling like that maybe there was a bigger picture, you know.
Well,
So
I think there is a bigger picture. We just don't know what that picture is. I
yeah,
mean, certainly every time we peel back and open a door to one of the secrets of the universe, there's 10 more doors behind it. So it is. I think you're to some degree you're right. There's a much bigger picture here. The question is, will we ever be able to see the whole big picture?
yeah, that's a question for you. That was actually one of the submitted questions in the chat. Will we ever be able to see the big? I was like, well, I know the answer to that one. I don't know it, but let me check here. I do have. I did get excited, and I said I would do a giveaway. So I've got one question here from Salty Shellback's actually a Navy vet. He was a mechanic. I think he did some sort of maintenance on aircraft. But I don't understand his question 100%, even though I've known him for a few years or like 10 years. He's asking basically, what's something that defies logic? Let's see. Okay. Explain the thought process of the powers that be. Is there a situation that can be talked about where the reason why policy was implemented really turned out to be just a boondoggle? Does that make sense? I don't. To be honest with
Go ahead.
you,
Yeah, I want to see if I can answer. Can you repeat it one more time? And I'm going to see if I can answer.
well, I'm trying
Powers
to
that be, I
actually.
think, are referring to probably someone in the government.
Yeah, it says, is there a situation that you can talk about where, for some reason, it's got public in, not parentheses, but quotations, and then it says, reason why some policy was implemented really turned out to be just a boondoggle for someone. I'm sorry, these questions were submitted online on my website,
Yeah,
so
no worries. Well, I mean, there's a lot of policies that wind up being boondoggles. It's not just,
yeah.
I mean, there are interests that happen all the time, and I don't know if he's referring to the original law, but it's the funding that came out of it from Harry Reid and Bob Bigelow's work, Skinwalker Ranch, but that wasn't a boondoggle at all. That there was some great results as a
And
result
I
of that
know it's
effort.
probably just me not being understand the question, because Salty's a good guy. He's a vet,
Mhm.
and I know him very well. He's a good guy. Here's another one from Clint. Do you feel it was a mistake for TTSA to collaborate with the Army in testing the exotic material in their? Oh, that's your guy. TTSA is the
Mhm.
yeah. Given the sensitive nature of the possible discoveries, did you advise them towards this direction? And if so, wouldn't it have been better to have, these questions are like 10 miles long, basically talking about wouldn't it have been better to have a third party, do the testing. So
So first of all, I was behind that. Yes, it was my recommendation. Yes, and it was me who did a lot of the work to make that happen. I do think having third parties is also good, but government has all the toys, and why wouldn't you want to leverage that technology and that expertise if you have the ability to do it? It also lends a lot more credibility when you have a government organization reporting back through government channels that, hey, there's something interesting here. There's more for us to look at. I think that's important. It adds an extra level of legitimacy and credibility to this endeavor. I mean, I can go out and pay anybody to do analysis on what I want them to do, and if I pay them enough money, they're going to give me the results I ask for. That's not the point. We want to keep this fair and objective. Best way to do is to let the government itself look at it and say, ooh, there may be something interesting here. So yeah, no, I'm not apologetic for that. I understand how people may look at it and say, oh, Lou, because you're a counterintelligence guy, you're from the government, yada, yada, yada. And therefore you're going back to the government and all that, nonsense about being a disinformation agent. Look, I don't know what to tell you. My suggestion for anybody out there who's got a better idea how to do it, then do it. You don't need my approval. Do it yourself. If you don't like the way I'm doing it, then feel free to do it your own self. And leave me alone. I'm happy. I'm happy doing this completely in the shadows. It'd be a lot easier for me. I do this in the open because that's part of my commitment to everybody. Is the transparency. I could have done all this behind the shadows and we'd never be having this conversation. Nobody would be knowing about it. So I think it's, I do think there's value in going back to certain elements in the government. I have a lot of friends there that can do a lot of good stuff. Not everybody in the government is evil and bad and the boogeyman and trying to take away your rights and your privileges. There are a lot of people there that are patriotic, that men and women who want to see this country thrive. And, I think, I don't believe we should throw the baby out with the bathwater. Look, if there's any guy who's got a problem with the way the government has treated this issue, it's me, because in that process, they've treated me like crap too. But that's not the entire government. That's not everybody in the government. That's a couple small isolated pockets that are coming after me. But, I don't hold the entire government responsible for that. A lot of those guys are my friends. We still talk every day. They're good people. They pay their mortgage and they go to Little League and PTA and soccer practice, and these are good human beings that are just as interested, by the way, in this topic as we are. Let's not forget that one of the largest collaborative spaces, virtual spaces in the intelligence community right now, is on the topic of UAPs. That shows there's an interest right now by analysts in the intelligence community to really work on this effort. I mean, how about we show some of those folks a little appreciation instead of lumping them into the category of disinformation and whatnot. That's my perspective.
I was also really curious about San Marino. What led you to that? Is it like the Sweden of Southern Europe, or is it some sort of neutral? I mean, is it the geographical location, or I'm kind of curious about.
Well, San Marino, I think you may have lost a poster behind you, if I'm not mistaken. Looks like one of your posters.
Oh, that was my Bob Lazar poster.
Okay.
My signed. I have to show off here. I have to be a noob and show off my signed Bob Lazar. I was going to ask you a question about him, but I was going to show you that.
Hopefully he signed that for free.
Bias. That's my Bob Lazar bias.
Hopefully he signed that for free and didn't charge you. I hope. So, back to what we were talking about, San Marino. San Marino is first of all one of the world's oldest existing republics. It's still around. To put that in contrast, the United States has been around since 1776, right? And this has been this little nation enclave within the geographic boundaries of Italy has been around much longer, almost 3 times that length, and they're still around. So yeah, to some degree, San Marino is a bit of considered as a Geneva, where it is a small country, doesn't have the resources that bigger countries have, but it also plays a very unique role as being kind of this neutral broker. And on a topic like this, wouldn't it be amazing that one of the smallest countries in the world winds up leading the conversation on one of the biggest, topics for our species? There's a lot of.
You're not going to be relocating there, though, right? You're just trying to help start some.
Oh, I will tell you. Yeah. But I'll tell you what. If I ever had an opportunity to get like a little place there, you bet your bottom dollar I would. It is so beautiful. People are so friendly. It is this little gem of a town. Imagine something like out of Lord of the Rings, where you have this walled city sitting on top of this, perched on top of this huge rock, and on a clear day, not only can you see out past the Adriatic Sea, but you can see into Croatia. And inside this walled city is this village with three castles on the top there, and it is really a special, charming little place. I think for this topic it makes sense because it is neutral. There aren't any politics. They don't necessarily side with the U.S. or Russia or China or anybody else. I think the total population is like 36,000 people in this country. And it used to be a banking kind of like, I guess, like some of these other countries like Switzerland. They used to be into banking, and I think something happened with, I don't know if it was with the government or with the markets, but they seem to have gotten out of that line of business. And I think
But are there people that like, is it basically the same team that are you trying to put together a new? I just, and forgive me, I just saw Max's videos just a few days ago.
Sure.
Where you were there, so I didn't quite understand. Is it going to be a private organization, or are we talking about governments coming together? Or
we're looking at governments. This is part of phase two. This is getting governments now around the world to come together. I mean, I've told people for the last year and a half, this is what third gear looked like. We're well into third gear. This is getting perhaps an international body, perhaps some sponsorship by the United Nations, maybe a UN resolution where we create an international investigatory body that represents global interests, and establish something like that, and also working with international organizations like NATO, for example, OTAN, as they say in Europe. I think. Yeah, I think that's exactly what should be done. Now that we've had this conversation here in the U.S. and people are coming to grips with the reality of UAPs are being real, it's certainly not a U.S. phenomenon only. It's a global phenomenon. So why not approach this from a global perspective?
And I think and honestly, I think some people are going to have issues with trying to, you know what I mean? Because it's kind of funny how we try to latch on to something like, no, the UAP thing is ours. It belongs to us, right? We can't let it go. We can't turn it over to a global entity.
Well,
right?
but that's a lot like saying the moon belongs to us, right? I mean,
Yeah.
but it doesn't. It doesn't belong to us.
Well, and you're going to have the people who say, "Oh no, the UN,"
Sure, and I understand that, but but look, there's no such thing as a perfect body or organization.
Yeah.
Why? Because it's made up of human beings, and human beings are by design not perfect. So, I don't know where else to have this conversation other than the international community under something like the UN construct, because that's how you keep it neutral. I also think it's important that the topic of this UAP mystery is democratized. I think this is a topic that everybody should have a piece of, and be able to ask the questions and be part of the discussion.
I just realized my earlier analogy was incorrect when I said Sweden. I meant to say Switzerland, not Sweden, when I was talking about neutrality.
Right. Yeah,
but I guess I can see that whole thing being difficult for a lot of people, honestly, that I know. To me, I'm glad we can somehow get out if we can get out under the political umbrella, of each country's political genre, then we can maybe have but I think that message is going to have to get out.
I mean, Tony, we've already had 70 years for this country to manage the narrative, and what's happened? Well, not a lot,
No, I agree. I'm not arguing with you that at all. I'm just, in the back of my mind, I've been online for, I'm 58, so I've been on the internet since it was created. And I can hear I can hear the tinfoil hatters right now.
Yeah.
The UN and the globalism,
Yeah.
and it's kind of funny. I'm honestly ready for a change with regards to this issue, but I think,
Well, we're our own worst enemy, aren't we? I mean,
yeah,
in this
yeah,
community,
yeah,
we're so eager to find answers. The problem is that oftentimes when having the discussion, we fill in the blanks with our our own beliefs, and that's and then and worse, we adopt them as fact. We take something from believing into knowing, and we have to be very careful with that. And that's why for many years, I believe anyways, why we haven't been able to have this conversation, because there's just too many people talking about things that are nonsensical that they state as fact when they're not. And people, rational minded people don't want to be subject to that. They want to have an intellectual and a scientific conversation. Anybody who tries to control the narrative, like a lot of people have tried in the past, it's a problem. And this is why my warning to everybody. It's hard because everybody wants to know what you think, and then they say, "Well, Lue Elizondo says this, so therefore, that must be the way it is." Um, I don't want to be that guy. That's why when we have these conversations, I tell you what I do know based upon the empirical evidence and data, and what that suggests, and then I usually keep my mouth shut on everything else, because there's the UFO community is already full of too many people with too many opinions, and that's been part of the problem. And so I don't want to add to that. I want to try to shed light if I can, and
well,
not just
as
create
a
more confusion.
as a hick from Tennessee, I just want to challenge those people to try to do the best you can to open your mind a little and think outside the box, and welcome. If you see somebody like Lue, hitting something like this, you see, to me, people like me need to see like that there's real people with good hearts doing something, especially if it's kind of stepping over out of that boundary that we've created for ourselves, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I don't want to challenge those people that I know what they're thinking is to look at Lue, a person like Lue who's putting himself out there. He doesn't have to be on my channel right now talking to me about this, but he is. And I just want them to open their minds a little bit. That's my challenge to those people.
Well, and in fairness, we need to keep our own minds as well open. We
Yeah.
can never get married to a narrative. That to me, that's the kiss of death. We need to really try to be as objective as possible, and always make room for new data, new information, rather than there's two types of people in the world. There's those people that will take new data and they will conform their opinions around that data, new data, and then there's people who will take data and try to conform that data around to comport to their opinions, and that's a problem. That's that confirmation bias and whatnot that and cognitive dissonance that we face all the time. That's the devil, man. That's what has made this topic so difficult to discuss in the past. We really need to be prepared to change our own paradigms based upon new information and the introduction of new data.
Yeah, and I was getting ready to kind of share something that happened to me, but I don't want to go into that. But I do want to say that once you've had an experience, it tends to open your mind really quickly, right? Because and as you probably guessed earlier, I'm not tactical like you, but I have had a little firearms training, right? And in that training, we're taught about flight or fight responses, right? Well, we're talking about responses that humans, like when I had my experience, there was no fight or flight. You know what I mean? There was just total like shock. It's something that the human DNA is not
And Tony, I've
prepared
heard
for.
that before, from people who've come up close and personal, allegedly, and they say, it was funny. I wasn't scared like I thought I would be, or excited like I thought it would be. It was almost this very interesting sense of indifference, that there's something in front of me and I don't have time to even really emotionally respond to it. It's
But
just kind
when
of.
was that? When was that something you can share as far as the timeline, or?
Well, yeah, what I'm expressing to you is these are what eyewitnesses have explained to me.
Oh,
In
darn!
their
I thought
in
I was
their
going to get you to talk about something you'd seen.
Not on this particular
Okay.
podcast. It's
Okay.
too, again, it's too early
Oh,
for that
shoot.
conversation because it's,
Yeah.
I don't want my personal observations and opinions to skew the collection of data.
And this is one of those. Yeah, this is one of those uh, categories that can really. I have found that really can screw up your the way people look at you, whether they do it subconsciously
Right.
or consciously, right? And so
Well, I'll give you a case in point, and I don't want to beat a dead horse on this, but some people will always automatically assume, well, because they haven't shown any signs of violence to us, that they're peaceful and they're watching over us, and they're incapable of having any type of hostile intent towards us, and that's utter rubbish. In my opinion, it could be the case, but could also be the case. We see with us all the time. We have a zoo, and there's gorillas in the enclosure, and we don't threaten them. In fact, we feed them, right? But make no mistake, there's always a shotgun on premise, because if one of those silverback gorillas gets loose and starts attacking, the patrons at the zoo, those animals are put down. They're put down immediately. As long as they stay in their enclosure, everything's okay. The moment a wild animal gets out of its enclosure, it's going to be put down very quickly, lethally usually. So, that's an example of here on this, just on our planet, in our own paradigm, why sometimes arguments like that don't make sense. Now, I'm not saying this is the case. So, let me preface this. People say, "Oh, Lou said." What I'm doing is just playing devil's advocate here. I'm just saying there's just as many examples where they could be interested in our technology for many different reasons, and maybe they're peaceful now, but it doesn't mean they always will be. And then again, maybe they will, right? So, but again, we just don't know. So let's try to figure out what's really going on here.
yeah, this in the same way that as a design and build contractor, I'm interested in ancient architecture, right? Um, in some ways, it was more advanced than ours. We don't build pyramids anymore.
Sure. Yeah, a lot of
But
that, the
yeah,
masons and sacred geometry.
yeah,
Look, the Romans really came up with we're still discovering innovative ways that the Romans were building,
they
right?
invented concrete, for God's sake.
Yeah, and underwater concrete on
Yeah,
top of
yeah,
that,
hydraulic.
and
Yeah,
the
yeah.
freeform arch and all sorts of stuff that we just marvel at today. Like, wow, how the
And it
hell
makes
did
you
they
wonder
figure
if,
that
if
out?
our civilization has even reached the point that maybe some previous
Well,
civilization had already passed.
we had the Industrial Revolution, right, a couple hundred years ago, that really changed everything using steam power, and yet it was Archimedes who really first discovered the first steam engine. He invented it. It was called the Archimedes steam engine, and now it wasn't used to produce work that we know of right now, but there was a lot of innovation using hydrology, for example, and water to make clocks and timepieces. Look at the Antikythera device that was discovered in the Mediterranean and the ocean there. They were highly sophisticated and complex. To some degree, they may have had even a better understanding of certain principles of as you say, construction and math and science than we do today. Um, I think you're right. There may be some lost knowledge there. We certainly, if the ancient library of Alexandria was still around, wouldn't that be something, right? Can you
That would be awesome.
imagine what humanity could learn from
Can
that?
you imagine the drawings? Just as a person that's into the design industry, just having ancient drawings, of projects.
Yeah,
I guess the pyramid. I guess the drawings of the pyramids were they may have been so advanced that sometimes it's funny because after I work a month or two on a design for a house, when I go out there, I can almost see it in my head, right? So I imagine the builders of the pyramids were the same way. They probably just had that level of intelligence that they didn't need a lot of once they had the footprint, they knew the math. They knew the math to get it done.
Yeah.
But well, that's awesome. Let me look at one more question that was submitted here.
Sure.
Let's see. I know I've only got you for an hour. Let's see. What's this? How do we prepare? Oh, that's the question I didn't like about how do we prepare the mass hysteria claims, or prepare the public for mass hysteria and dissolution of religions, institutions, and I don't like that question, to be honest with you. I'm reading it because I told him I would, but
go ahead. We can get into that. Do you want me to respond?
Well, it's basically, how do we prepare the world for an ET or UT reality? Have you put any thought into mass hysteria claims and the dissolution? I think he's talking about the tearing down of religions,
sure,
religious institutions, and the chaos it could create.
Well, any religious institution that manipulates people and doesn't provide the truth should be torn down. So I'm okay with that. But then again, I don't consider that a legitimate religion. I consider that a cult. I think most reputable religious institutions will look at this and really have nothing to fear. I don't think there's going to be dissolution of religious institutions like that. As far as causing great panic and pandemonium, the Rand Corporation did a study where they said that potentially certain governments could collapse and religious and social institutions could implode. We haven't seen that, have we? In fact, last I checked, the numbers of church attendance is at an all-time high. So I don't know if that study was very accurate, maybe for the time that it was written, but as the song goes, times they are changing. And I think society is prepared for the realization of what's happening. And I don't think it's in human nature necessarily to there's another option. So you just talked about fight or flight, right, which is a human reaction to a threat, but maybe there's a third reaction, right? We just kind of mentioned that some people just don't have any reaction at all. They just sit there in wonderment and amazement. Maybe that's what's happening here. Maybe as we get further down the road of disclosure, there is an acceptance. It's not fight or flight. People aren't running to the streets and rioting or running to the hills and hiding in a cave. Maybe they choose to sit and watch the beautiful sunset for what it is. And go ahead.
I think a lot of and I probably spend too much time on Reddit, to be honest with you, which is funny because my demographic doesn't belong on Reddit, right?
Boy, Reddit hates me, man. I can't even if I get on Reddit, man, I'll tell you, it's just
I get so many of these people telling me things that don't have any experience. Like, I grew up in the Southern Baptist Church, right? Well, I don't consider myself a Southern Baptist, but my mother took me there. It was like school for us, right? And so, but our church was also the first church in the Southern Baptist Convention to allow a female associate pastor. And that was 20 some odd years ago. So I think people just need to give religions a chance to adjust, chill a little bit. Don't be so judgmental.
Right.
If you don't have experience with that particular religious, sect or whatever category, just don't be so judgmental.
My experience has been actually very positive, and at least from the Western, even Eastern religions. But I've got friends and family that are everything from Christian, Jewish, Muslim, and they none of them feel threatened by this. I've got some friends of mine that are Buddhists. I won't say who, but some of them are actually pretty well known here on the Twitterverse, and even Hindu. And again, same thing. It's like, no, this doesn't conflict with any of our philosophical or theological leanings at all. I think you're right. I mean, there are obviously I encountered some at the Pentagon, but those were fundamentalists, and a fundamentalist is a fundamentalist. It doesn't matter, what religion you're from. Extremism in any form, it's still extremism, and they're always going to have problems. It doesn't matter, again, whether it's, and believe me, I faced extremism up close and personal, my time in combat in war zones. But again, that's not indicative or representative of a religion. That's just unfortunately fundamentalists, and we have them here in the United States, right? We have people that will do and say horrible things under the guise of religion. To some degree, there was a very dark period in our own country with the KKK, which wrapped itself in a religious institution when in reality it wasn't religious at all. And that's true with a lot of religions. So fundamentalism is fundamentalism, and by any other word, it's still a fundamentalist.
I mean, to ask you about this earlier. Your military experience, as far as when you first served, was it Iraq or Afghanistan, or what was it, or was it just intelligence work?
Yeah, it was those places. It was Middle East and Afghanistan. I lived for a while in Asia. Lived for a while in Latin America. Pretty much all over the world. Early in my career was focused primarily on counterinsurgency and supporting counter narcotics operations throughout Latin America. And then right after 9/11, I spent pretty much the rest of my career over in those parts of the world.
The biggest thing I resent, I'm sorry, my brother, I regret, was that I didn't talk to my brother enough about, and I didn't ask him a few times, right? He joined, I think, 78 and was there at 82. It wasn't, it's just a short stint. His friends talked him into getting out and going into contracting, which was probably a mistake. But he never told me what they were doing in the early 80s, 80s. And it's kind of funny. One day I want to pick your brain as to what they were doing, what Airborne was doing in 1980.
Well, those were hot times. We were in the midst of the Cold War and executing proxy wars against our enemy at the time, then Soviet Union. We had the Beirut bombings. Terrorism around the planet was everywhere. For Latin America, you had Sendero Luminoso, Tupac Amaru, Zapatistas. Then over in Europe, you had RAF, Red Army Faction. You had Brigada Rosa, Red Brigade. You had in the Middle East, of course, Black September and Abu Nidal organization, and the whole world was just strife with conflict. And
I remember my mother was just distraught, because she knew how bad my brother was about answering to authority figures. And but I would say, Mom, there's nothing going on, just trying to make her feel better. There's no wars, it's just Lebanon or some crazy, Panama or something,
Grenada, yeah.
Grenada.
There were a lot of a lot of things happening. There really were.
Yeah.
You had at the time the kidnapping of General Dozier. This is when Aldo Moro, president then of Italy, was found assassinated. You had kidnapping plots going all over the place. It's something we've been dealing with for some time. A lot of people forget that, it wasn't long after that, long before we ever went to war in Afghanistan. We had the bombings of the barracks in Saudi Arabia, and we lost a lot of people there too. And we had the embassy bombings in Africa, and so we've been dealing with this for a long time. Unfortunately, it's just I hate to say part of the human condition, but until we figure out how to play well with others, I guess we're going to be.
Well, that's funny. It kind of segues into a question that I had that I didn't think I was going to get into, but you hear these theories of these beings are just they're not. We're just sort of an experimental. Species that they instigate wars to see how we, that kind of seems kind of funny to me, but there are people who would ask that kind of thing. We do seem to be a species that's always at war.
Well, we are, even amongst ourselves. I mean,
yeah.
We even in our own country, we had domestic terrorism. We had organizations that were not very, very sympathetic to their fellow man. And it seems to be something that is very much part of the human condition, and you can see micro representations of that even in the family unit. You see, unfortunately, that abusive husbands out there, or children who are abused physically and emotionally and mentally. We are definitely an imperfect species, and I think therein lies part of the problem. By nature, we have these tendencies that tend to hold us back from evolving into what we can be and what we should be. And it's we have to keep ourselves in check. We really do. And it's easy to point the finger at your neighbor, and say, it's your fault. But we should first probably start looking in the mirror and seeing how we can, change ourselves. And if we change ourselves, then society will automatically change.
I'm going to ask this question, but it's only because this guy is a friend of mine. I don't like it again because I don't like.
No worries.
This is the one I least like. I only had like 6 questions submitted for this little giveaway I'm doing, but this one really got on my nerves, and I'm going to get him for this one. It says, "Hey Lou, since your family originally came from Cuba, did you have any doubts working for or with the United States government or military when you were younger?"
Absolutely not. This country has afforded my family opportunities that look. I'll share with you something that's pretty ironic. The only place in Cuba my father was allowed to go to as a kid was the island, Cuba, right? He's from Cuba. But the one area he wasn't allowed to go to was Guantanamo Bay because it's an American base. And finds himself fighting in a revolution against tyranny and communism, and winds up going to jail, being a POW. And now my whole family goes into exile. We're here in the United States, my dad to start a new life. And we're just one generation away later, because I'm in exile because of his participation in the Bay of Pigs. The only place I am allowed to go to is Guantanamo Bay, and I'm on the other side of the jail cell, right? So life is ironic, and you learn a lot of lessons. I remember stories of my father telling me how he was abused and mistreated in prison, and unfortunately tortured, and those are life lessons you take with you. And so when my time came to do work for the U.S. government, I remembered those and made sure that we did our best to treat people, human beings, with dignity and respect that human beings are entitled to.
And the reason I didn't want to ask you that question was because I have a lot of respect for you, and I thought it was indignant.
No, it's not. No, it's understandable because look, this country gave me opportunities and my family opportunities that no other country would or could, and that's probably why I remain so fiercely loyal to it. Because as for all the faults it may have, it's still a really good place to live, and there's a lot of really good people that are part of this country. When you get a chance to go sit down face to face with people like Dave Fravor, Chad Underwood, or Alex Dietrich, or Ryan Graves, that represents the best of this country. These are people who have given their entire lives, and their families had to sacrifice so we all could enjoy the life that we do. And that to me it's sacred. It's profoundly intimate for me, and that's probably why I am the way I am. I am an unabashedly pro-American. I make no bones about it. But
it just oozes out of you. I don't know how anybody can ask questions like that.
Yeah. But I'm also very pro world and international too. The values that we hold to us here as Americans, to some degree, should be inalienable rights, right? For everybody else, the freedom to speak and the freedom to assemble and the freedoms that we take for granted here.
And for all those people who bash our country, America, I think good Americans make good international students or leaders, right?
Yeah.
I mean, those like
we're all ambassadors, right? I mean, we can choose to be the ugly American and be loud, rude, and obnoxious, or we can, be the American that we should be, and that's kind and generous and patient. That's just my perspective.
Well, let me ask you this: what are you? What's your kind of next steps?
Well, right now I'm getting the evil eye that I'm already 7 minutes.
I know. I saw it. We're 7 minutes over. I appreciate it though, Lou.
Yeah,
and I thought I better start with the closing questions. What's your
next steps? I'll be in DC next week. I, doing what
you can't tell me why or anything.
I mean, it's about this topic, obviously. I'm not going for vacation.
Well, I just want to say thanks again, Lou. I mean, you're talking to ordinary people, and I think you're a great ambassador, and your history and your intent and your heart, all that stuff.
Well, I appreciate that, Tony, but I am just a regular person. I mean, that's
I know, but people tend to let it go to their heads sometimes, and you haven't. Okay, so just take the compliment.
Well, I appreciate it very much, Tony. Thank you so much. I'm happy to do this anytime you want.
Thank you, Lou. I really appreciate it, and tell Jennifer I said thank her because
I will. Yeah,
she's the the backbone of the.
She is. I'll tell you. I hate to say, but disclosure probably lives and dies with her because she's only reason why I'm allowed to do this is because she gives me the support to do it. It's been a hard road.
All right. Well, thanks again. I can't thank you enough, and thanks, Lou, and good luck. And we'll be sending out prayers and good vibes and all that. Good stuff.
Thank you, Tony. I appreciate it. Take care. And until next time.
Thanks.
God bless. Take care.
Bye. All right. There you go. That was awesome. My biggest fear was that I was going to ask questions that had been asked before. Too many of them, because I watched 20 or 30 interviews with Lou, and that's really it was great. It was great research, right? I did all this stuff, all this. Where's my thing? And I did the crazy thing of trying to. I just got StreamYard today. When I was interviewing Chris Lato, I had some bandwidth issues. Thank you. I'm not talking anything bad about my IT guy. He's a friend of mine, but I thought I would try StreamYard. It's kind of funny. And I know I'm rambling, kind of aftershock here for the interview because I really have a lot of respect for Lou. And the goal was to get information from him, trying to get some new information. I felt like when I was trying to get to the person, because I really like Lou. He reminds me a lot of my brother. And, who also had a career in the military. He's not with us anymore, but he's that kind of person who, bigger than life, but he would talk to anybody, and so, I've interviewed about maybe 30, 40 people on my channel. And I have to say that this is the next best is Clinton Riddle. It was the World War II vet who flew in one of the gliders, I guess they went in a day before the invasion and landed behind enemy lines. And I have like 6 videos where I went and spent 2 or 3 days with him. He was an awesome guy too, but these guys are really bigger than life, and they're hard to lasso, because Lou's been interviewed so many times that that he gets into a mode, and my goal was for this time was to kind of break that mold. And this is not, obviously it's not criticism of him. It's just that you tend to get into a rhythm, and I was trying to interrupt that rhythm. But anyway, thanks everybody for watching, and I'm excited for the future. Can't wait to see what's coming next. And thanks again.